The rain had thinned to a mist by the time anyone really saw him.
A narrow two-lane road curves around the edge of Bend, Oregon, where new houses lean against old pine forest.
Headlights glide past wet asphalt. Wipers keep their slow rhythm. And most people are just trying to get home before the next band of weather rolls in. At first, he's just a dark smudge at the shoulder. Easy to miss. Easy to explain away. A tiny bobcat kitten, no bigger than a house cat, is pressed against the guardrail, soaked through. His fur is plastered to his ribs, ears flattened, eyes raw from crying. And between his paws, locked in his teeth as if it were life itself, is an old canvas bag. That's our doorway into this story. Because by the end, when people finally learn what was hidden inside that worn bag, they don't argue about whether it mattered. They go quiet. Really quiet. The kind of silence that only comes when emotions catch up with you all at once. For now, though, most cars don't know any of that. One sedan slows just a little. The driver squints through the rain-streaked windshield, trying to decide if that shape is a cat, a raccoon, or just a piece of trash snagged on the rail. A pickup switches lanes to avoid the shoulder. A phone lifts, quick video through the glass, then accelerates away. The world keeps moving. On the gravel edge, the kitten doesn't move much at all. He's wedged his small body between the metal and the bag, like he's trying to shelter it from the traffic. Every time a car passes, his claws sink deeper into the fabric, his whole frame tightening with the impact of each hiss of tires through water. He doesn't know about headlights or insurance, or how humans make sense of the world. He only knows that somewhere, not long ago, this bag smelled like warmth and milk, and someone who loved him. Now it just smells like cold canvas, old oil, and rain. But he clings anyway. If you've ever loved an animal, you might recognize something in that grip, that stubborn loyalty that refuses to let go of what once felt like home. This is how heartwarming stories often begin in real life. Not with music or speeches, but with a small life on the edge of something dangerous, holding on to the last familiar thing it has. A compact SUV pulls onto the shoulder at last. The driver, a woman on her way back from a late shift, cracks the door against the wind and steps out just far enough to see clearer. The little bobcat's eyes are wide, pupils blown, body trembling so hard the bag shakes with him. He emits a sound that doesn't fit neatly into meow or growl. It's thinner, roar, a sound of pure, frayed fear. Her instinct is to rush in, scoop him up, tuck that tiny body into the crook of her arm the way you would a kitten from a shelter. But even from a few yards away, she can tell he's not a stray pet. He is wild. Even drenched and shaking, there's a different set of muscles under that spotted coat. A different way he holds his head. Kindness, in moments like this, isn't about doing whatever your heart wants. It's about doing what helps. She backs up slowly, hands visible, trying not to stir him into traffic. Her phone feels clumsy in her wet fingers as she scrolls through contacts, searching for the number her neighbor once mentioned, for a wildlife rescue just outside town. She doesn't know it yet, but this small choice to call for help instead of driving away and hoping someone else will, is what lets this inspirational story exist at all. When the line picks up, a calm voice on the other end listens carefully. Name, location, what the animal looks like, how he's behaving. The woman's breath fogs in the cold air as she describes it.
He's tiny,
she says, watching the kitten trying to drag the bag a few inches further from the road.
He won't let go of this old bag. Like if I get too close, he'll, I don't know, lose his mind? The voice tells her they'll send someone to stay in the car, to keep her distance, keep her lights on, just so other drivers see there's something happening on the shoulder. As she sits back behind the wheel, rain ticking gently on the roof, she glances at him in her side mirror. He looks even smaller from this angle. The bag is almost his size. There's something heartbreakingly soulful in the way he curls around it, as if that scrap of canvas is the last thin wall between him and a world that doesn't make sense anymore. Maybe you've been there, in your own way. Maybe it wasn't an old bag. Maybe it was a collar, still hanging by the door months after your dog passed. A favorite chair,
no one sits in. A mug you keep washing and putting back on the same shelf even though the hands that loved it are gone. We don't always hold on because it's logical. We hold on because love leaves echoes in objects, in routines, in places, and letting go feels, for a while, like betrayal. Back on the roadside, the minutes stretch. The kitten's movements are getting slower now. Water runs in thin rivulets off his whiskers. Twice, he tries to shift the bag and almost tips over with the effort. He presses his face into the stained canvas instead, eyes shutting for a moment, as if the scent might carry him somewhere else. Somewhere kinder. There's nothing fairy tale neat about this. No instant happy ending. Just a frightened bobcat trying to keep the last piece of his world from being taken, and a stranger in a parked car, hoping she made the right call. Up the road, a set of headlights appears, then slows. A battered rescue truck pulls in behind her, hazard lights clicking on, orange flashes mixing with the damp blue of evening. A man steps out, closing the door with the kind of care that comes from long habit, not drama. We'll get to know him better soon. We'll learn what he lost, and why this tiny shape on the shoulder hits him harder than he expected. For now, we only know his name is Daniel, and that he's the one who answered the call. He walks toward the kitten with a slow, steady gait, rain soaking the shoulders of his jacket. No sudden moves, no noise. He's done this before. He knows that with wild animals, love looks like patience and distance and respect, not rushing in for contact. The woman in the SUV watches him kneel in the gravel, watches the kitten bare his teeth weakly, still hugging the bag with all four paws. She feels something shift in her chest. It's one thing to feel sorry from behind glass. It's another to see someone put their knees in the cold mud for a life this small. In that moment, she understands something quiet. Kindness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just staying put when you could have driven away. As Daniel opens his kit and the rain picks up again, we're going to leave them there for a moment, and that narrow ribbon of road between forest and subdivision, between fear and help. Because to really understand why this tiny bobcat kitten clung to an old canvas bag, and why what they found inside left everyone speechless, we need to step back. We need to see who Daniel is when he closes his own front door at night, and what kind of grief he was already carrying long before this call. If you can, stay with this story a little longer. Let this small life at the roadside sit beside your own memories of love and loyalty. In the next part, we'll walk into Daniel's quiet house and see why he, of all people, could recognize a broken heart wrapped around a worn-out bag. Long before a tiny bobcat kitten clung to an old canvas bag on the side of the highway, Daniel was holding on to something of his own. Most mornings began in a quiet little house on the edge of town. The kind where the sun comes in low through a kitchen window and paints a stripe across the floor. For years, there had always been the same sound at that time of day. Nails ticking across wood. A soft huff of breath, the weight of a familiar head resting against his leg while he made coffee. Now the house wakes up to silence. The dog bed is still there in the corner of the living room. The fabric is worn smooth in the center, where an old body used to curl into sleep. The water bowl has been washed and turned upside down, but not packed away. The leash hangs by the door, looped over the same hook as always, as if at any moment someone might jingle it and watch a tail appear around the corner. He tells people he hasn't had time to deal with it yet. The truth is, he's not sure who he'll be when those things are gone. He still hears phantom footsteps some evenings, a sigh that sounds like it belongs to someone who isn't there anymore. Sometimes he catches himself moving his hand toward the empty space beside him on the couch, fingers ready to sink into fur that only exists now in memory. If you've ever lost a dog or a cat or any companion who knew your routines better than you did, you probably understand this without needing many words. Love and loyalty don't stop just because a heartbeat does. They stay in objects, in habits, in the way you pause at the door and look down, even when there's nothing to step over. Daniel works at a small wildlife rescue center outside of Bend. From the outside, it doesn't look like much. A low building, a row of modest enclosures, wood stacked against the side for winter. But inside, Kindness has worn deep grooves into the place. The whiteboard by the door still has a faded doodle from months ago. Someone's idea of a bobcat, drawn with two big paws and a crooked smile. On the staff fridge, there's a photo of his old dog, held up by a magnet in the shape of a pine cone. No one has taken it down. Nobody asks if he wants it moved. The unspoken agreement is simple. When he's ready, he'll say so. In the mornings, before the phones start ringing, he walks the center's hallway with a clipboard in hand. It's a quiet ritual. Check the owls first. A glance at the chart, a soft look through the viewing window to make sure eyes are bright and wings are tucked. Then the raccoons, the fox that came in with a bad leg, the handful of songbirds in recovery. He moves gently, partly because wild animals don't tolerate sudden movements, and partly because his own emotions are moving slowly these days. Numb in places, tender in others. There's a kind of soulful order to it. The way he refills water dishes, straightens towel edges, notes down weights and medications. Healing here isn't dramatic. It's measured in ounces gained. Wounds that look a little less angry each day. Frightened eyes that blink a little slower when someone passes. What he doesn't say out loud is that after his dog died, he wasn't sure he could keep doing this work. Loving animals, knowing they might not make it, showing up for their pain when his own was already heavy. It felt for a while like trying to carry water in cupped hands that wouldn't stop shaking. One evening, a few weeks after the loss, he sat at his kitchen table with a takeout container he barely tasted. His phone lay face down beside it. Paperwork from the center was spread out in front of him, but he wasn't reading. His eyes kept drifting to the empty bed in the corner. He had a choice right there in that quiet room. Pull back from this work to protect what was left of his heart, or lean further in and see if showing up for other fragile lives might slowly stitch something back together. He chose to stay. Maybe that doesn't sound dramatic, but for a lot of people, especially in the second half of life, those small, quiet choices are the ones that shape everything. To keep loving, even when you know how badly love can hurt. To let your tenderness stay alive in a world that doesn't always reward it. That's its own kind of courage. At the rescue, no one asked him to be over it. They just handed him the same clipboard, the same keys, the same trust. They knew moral stories don't need speeches. They're written in what we keep doing after the hard thing happens. There are moments when his grief catches him by surprise. When a young volunteer laughs because a rehab fox splashes water everywhere, and the sound reminds him of how his dog used to shake after a bath. When a cardboard box comes in with a frightened kitten inside, and his hands move automatically, remembering the weight of another body from another time. He feels it again one late afternoon, as clouds gather over the Cascades, and the light turns that familiar pewter gray. The day has been long but ordinary. A hawk with a wing injury, a raccoon that finally ate after days of refusing food. He's finishing notes at the desk, the building humming with that tired end-of-shift quiet. His phone buzzes. The number is local. He almost lets it go to voicemail. Then something, some old habit of responsibility, makes him answer. On the other end is the woman from the highway. Her words come in short, breathy bursts.
I think it's a bobcat. A baby. He's on the side of 97 just before the new turnoff. He's soaked. He won't let go of this old bag like it's all he's got.
Daniel listens in silence for a moment, pen paused above his paperwork. There's a strange echo in her description. Not of his dog, exactly, but of that feeling he's been carrying since the day he walked out of the vet's office with an empty leash in his hand. The sense of standing at the edge of something familiar and finding it gone, except for one worn object that still smells like love. He tells her they'll send someone. Then, before he can think too much about it, he realizes someone means him. He grabs the rescue kit, shrugs on a jacket from the peg by the door. As he reaches for his keys, his hand brushes the magnet on the fridge holding up his dog's photo. He stops, just long enough to look. "Keep an eye on things, old man," he murmurs, the way you talk to a memory when no one else is around to hear. It's not a fairy tale prayer, just a small, loyal habit that helps him keep moving. In the truck, the road hums under the tires as he turns onto the highway.
Wipers sweep back and forth, steady as a heartbeat.
Outside, the world is wet and gray. Inside, a different kind of storm is still settling in his chest. He doesn't know yet that the tiny bobcat kitten ahead of him is clinging not just to a bag, but to the last scent of a whole life torn away. He doesn't know that opening that canvas flap will leave even seasoned rescuers struggling to find words. What he does know is that there is someone small, frightened and alone on the side of the road, holding on with everything they have, and he recognizes that kind of holding on. If this feels close to something you've lived, if you've ever sat in a quiet house after losing an animal who felt like family, it might help to stay with this story a little longer. In the next part, we'll go back to that rainy highway shoulder and watch what happens when one grieving human finally kneels beside one terrified bobcat kitten, and together they start to open the old bag that neither of them is quite ready to let go of. By the time Daniel pulls onto the shoulder, the rain has settled into that fine, steady drizzle that soaks everything without making much noise. His headlights sweep over the guardrail, then catch on a small, hunched shape pressed tight against it. For a beat, all he sees is the pale smear of canvas, darkened by water and oil. Then the shape beside it lifts its head. The tiniest bobcat kitten, eyes far too big for his face, looks up into the light. Here is our quiet hook. In a few hours, this old bag will be sitting on the metal table under warm lamps. A handful of people who have seen just about everything in rescue work will stand around it, and when they finally see what's buried inside, nobody will quite know what to say. Right now, though, it's just Daniel, the kitten, and the hiss of cars rolling by. He steps out of the truck and closes the door with care. No slam, no rush. The rescue kit hangs from his shoulder, the net folded in his hand. He moves the way someone does when they've learned that wild hearts don't respond well to sudden kindness. Slow, low to the ground, predictable. From a few yards away, he stops. The kitten is soaked, fur clumped into spikes along his back. His paws are wrapped around the canvas bag, claws sunk deep into the fabric as if it might be pulled away at any second. His jaw works as he bites down on the handle, teeth gritted, a tiny body trying to shield something much larger than himself. Daniel lowers himself into the gravel, knees getting wet. He says nothing at first, just lets the kitten see him there, not moving closer, not looming. The sound that comes from the little bobcat is thin and torn, half growl, half sob. The kind of noise that comes out when fear and exhaustion collide. "You've been out here a while, huh?" Daniel murmurs at last, voice soft, more for himself than for the animal. "You don't want to lose that bag, do you?" He has to decide in this moment what matters more: getting the kitten into the truck as quickly as possible, or respecting the one thing this frightened creature clearly isn't ready to surrender. In moral stories, we like things neat. In real life, they're rarely that simple. He shifts the folded net, lets the kitten see it. The little body tenses, paws clamp harder around the bag, and the net's shadow touches the edge of the canvas. The kitten makes a desperate lunge, trying to drag the whole thing toward the dark line of the trees. He barely moves it an inch. Daniel feels the ache of that effort in his own chest. He's seen people do the same with hospital bags, memory boxes, urns, small objects pulled close when everything else had been torn away. "All right," he says quietly. "You can keep it." He changes angles. Instead of trying to separate them, he works to bring them in together. It's clumsy at first, like threading a needle in the rain. A slow arc of net, a pause when the kitten's breathing spikes, a second try. This time, the net edges around both bodies, the tiny bobcat, the old bag. When he finally lifts, it's a single bundle. Fur, canvas, rainwater, fear. The drive back to the center is only a few miles, but it feels longer. In the carrier on the passenger seat, the kitten is a tight ball around the bag, nose buried so deep into the damp fabric that his whiskers disappear. Every bump in the road jolts them together. If you've ever ridden home from a vet with an empty collar on the seat beside you, You already know how long a few miles can feel. At Cascade Wildlife Rescue, the lights are low. It's past closing, but the building never really sleeps. A side door opens, spilling a soft strip of yellow onto the gravel. Inside, the exam room is small but steady. A metal table, a tray of supplies, a heating pad already warming under a clean towel. Lena is there, pulling on gloves.
Doctor?
Harris adjusts the lamp, the reflection pooling on the steel like a second moon. They don't waste time. They've seen enough to know that tiny wild things can slip away in minutes if they hesitate. The carrier door opens. The kitten doesn't explode out the way a healthy animal might. He just presses harder into the bag, body shaking, eyes darting at every movement. When they lift him onto the table, the canvas comes with him, as if stitched to his chest. Let him keep it, Daniel says quietly when someone reaches instinctively toward the bag. At least for now. They work around it. Temperature first, too low. Gums pale. Fur rough with grit. A small cut along the flank, not deep but angry-looking in the lamplight. All the basic facts of a life pushed past its limit. Only when they're sure he's stable enough to rest do they turn their attention fully to the bag. Up close, it's clearly an old tool bag, the kind a worker might toss in the back of a truck. Thick canvas, a torn logo from some forgotten company, one corner stained dark with grease. It smells like fuel, metal, wet dirt, and something else. Check for nails, glass, anything sharp, Dr. Harris says, more out of habit than fear. They've seen animals cling to dangerous objects before. Better to know. Lena kneels, so her face is level with the kitten. She moves slowly, fingers sliding along the far edge of the bag where his paws aren't clamped. He watches every millimeter, pupils wide, muscles wired like a spring. Easy, she whispers. I'm not taking it, just looking. She lifts the flap a fraction of an inch. Something soft and darker than the canvas shifts inside. At first, it looks like trash, a rag maybe. Then she pulls a little more into the light. It's a piece of flannel, once red and black plaid, now faded and stiff with dried milk, threadbare in spots where it has been kneaded and nuzzled. Embedded in the fibers are tiny, pale hairs, kitten fur, and longer, sleek strands from an adult bobcat. The room goes quiet. No one needs to explain it, but someone does, softly, for the sake of saying it out loud. She used this, Daniel murmurs, eyes fixed on the cloth. She must have dragged it in and made the den, in this bag. In the mind of a mother bobcat, an old tool bag isn't garbage. It's shelter. It's walls, roof, insulation. Something she found near the new construction site maybe, where trees came down and the earth shook. She lined it with fur, with flannel, with milk. She soaked it with the smell of love and safety so that her kittens would know this is home. And now, this little one is clinging to the only piece of that world he has left. There's something deeply soulful in that realization. The way a wild animal takes what we throw away and turns it into a nursery. The way a baby who has lost almost everything still knows, with absolute loyalty, which object holds the last echo of warmth. We sometimes think heartwarming stories are about big gestures, but often they are about this. One small bag on a table, a tiny body wrapped around it, and 3 humans standing in a circle, feeling their throats tighten over a simple piece of cloth. If you've ever kept a sweater because it still smells like someone you loved, or opened a drawer to let yourself feel close to a memory for just a moment, you understand the language of scent more than you realize. It's not just science. It's emotions and history folded into fabric and carried forward. For wildcats like this bobcat kitten, that language is everything. It tells them where food is, where danger is, where love once lived. This old bag with its flannel and fur and faint scent of milk is more than an object. It's a map of a life that was there and then wasn't. Daniel looks at Cedar. That's the name they've written on the chart, though they don't say it out loud around him. and sees the way his nose presses deeper into the cloth whenever anyone moves too quickly. The little chest rises and falls, each breath anchored to that patch of fabric. In the next part of this story, we're going to linger here a while. We'll follow Cedar through days of slow recovery, and we'll explore how scent, routine, and quiet kindness become the bridge between panic and peace. If you'd like, stay with us. Let this tiny wild heart and his battered canvas bag sit beside whatever you're holding on to in your own life. There's more to learn from the way he heals than from anything we could say in a single night. Some stories turn on one dramatic moment. This one doesn't. For Cedar, the tiny bobcat kitten, healing begins in a room so ordinary you could almost miss how sacred it is. The exam lights have been turned down. The metal table is empty now. Cedar lies in a low enclosure on the floor, tucked into a corner where the shadows feel kinder. His body is still thin, paws too big for his frame, but his breathing has evened out. The old canvas bag rests inside with him, flannel exposed, the fabric stiff with dried milk and time. He's not ready to let it go. Not even close. Every recovery at the rescue is built on routines, not miracles. Morning, midday, evening. Check the eyes, check the weight, check the charts. It's not glamorous. It's the slow, loyal version of love that doesn't make headlines, but it changes lives all the same. On the first morning after his rescue, the hallway is quiet. Coffee hums in the break room. Outside, pine branches drip yesterday's rain. Daniel walks his usual route with the clipboard in hand, but his steps are different today, softer. He knows that behind one of these doors is a wild heart trying to decide if the world is still trustworthy. He stops at Cedar's enclosure, but he doesn't lean in or tap the glass. He simply lowers himself onto a stool and sits. The kitten's eyes slit open, gold catching the faint light, muscles tensing instantly. The canvas bag rustles as he pulls it closer with one paw, nose burying into the patched flannel, like he's trying to disappear. "Morning, little guy," Daniel says, voice low and even. No cooing, no baby talk, just a presence. For a long time, nothing else happens. The air vent hums. Somewhere down the hall, a drawer closes. Cedar stays wrapped around the bag, eyes fixed on the stranger who refuses to act like a threat, but also refuses to vanish. This is where the language of scent and safety starts to matter. In the wild, bobcats don't have calendars or clocks. They have smell. Mothers rub their cheeks along den walls, lick their kittens clean, nestle them against fur that tells them over and over, "You are mine. You are safe. This is home." That flannel in the canvas bag is saturated with all of that. Milk, fur, the trace of a body that warmed him. When everything else was taken, that smell stayed. From a scientific point of view, familiar scent can help lower stress in animals. Heart rate can slow, muscles unclench, systems that were locked in panic can begin to reset. But you don't have to know anything about hormones to understand it. If you've ever opened a drawer just to breathe in a sweater that still carries the faint hint of someone's cologne or perfume, you already know what Cedar is doing. He's trying to hold on to the last place his world made sense. The staff work around that truth with quiet kindness. When Lena comes in with a small dish of specially prepared food, she doesn't remove the bag. She slides the dish just inside the enclosure and retreats a step, giving Cedar space to choose. He doesn't. Not at first. His eyes flick to the dish, then back to the bag. His nose twitches, torn between hunger and the instinct to guard what little he has left. Hours pass like this the first day. A few sniffs, a quick flinch at any sound. A tiny body that refuses to move 1 inch farther from the scent of his mother. These days are not exciting. They don't make for flashy headlines. But this is where real heartwarming stories live. On the third day, something small shifts. Daniel is sitting by the enclosure again, reading aloud from the chart in a tone barely above a whisper. Dates, weights, simple notes. He's not trying to entertain. He just doesn't want Cedar's whole world to be the sound of closing doors and clinking metal. Cedar's nose lifts from the flannel. His ears swivel. He listens. After a long minute, he stretches his neck, not his whole body, just his neck, toward the dish. His paws stay anchored to the bag. His back paw flexes, claws snagging the canvas, as if to say, "If I do this, you're not taking this from me." He takes one cautious bite, then another. He chews with his eyes locked on Daniel, every muscle ready to bolt. But he doesn't. A few bites become a few more. The dish nudges slightly as his whiskers brush against it. When he's done, he retreats immediately, tucking his face back into the flannel, sides rising and falling a little more steadily. It is not a fairy tale transformation. No dramatic music, no instant trust. Just one small act of bravery in a day full of fear. If you've ever pushed a plate away for days after a loss, then found yourself nibbling at something one afternoon and realizing you were hungrier than you thought, you know this moment. You know how big a few bites can be. Over the next week, Cedar's world is built on repetitions. Every morning, the same soft scrape of Daniel's boots on the floor, the same rustle of Lena's clipboard, the same murmured exchanges in the hall about dosages and weights and the weather outside the window. Every afternoon, dishes appear and disappear. Towels are rotated. Litter is changed. No one makes a big deal when Cedar's weight on the chart creeps up by a few ounces. A small arrow next to the number says enough. Through it all, the canvas bag stays. Sometimes Cedar curls around it, head resting on the flannel. Sometimes, when his sleep is deep enough that his paws relax, it shifts a little away. He will wake with a start, reach out blindly, and drag it back to his chest, nose pressed into the threads until his breathing settles again. Watching this, Daniel thinks about his own house. The empty dog bed he still hasn't moved, the leash by the door, the bowl turned upside down but left in its old spot. He sees, in this wild creature, the same stubborn loyalty he feels inside himself, the same refusal to let go of objects that carry love. There's something quietly inspirational in that recognition. It's easy to think of wild animals as completely different from us, but here, in this small room, the distance narrows. Grief looks similar, whether you walk on 2 legs or 4. Now and then, while Cedar sleeps, the team talks softly about the bigger picture, about how habitat near town is shrinking, how construction pushes bobcats into strange places, how mothers do their best with what's left. These aren't lectures, just tired people connecting the dots between an old tool bag and the way we build our neighborhoods. Kindness, in this story, isn't a single grand gesture. It's showing up to do the same careful, gentle thing every day. Refilling a dish, sitting quietly on a stool, respecting a wild animal's need for space, even when every part of you wants to reach through the bars and smooth their fur. If you find yourself wondering whether your own small routines matter, watering the same plant each morning, sending the same check to the same shelter every month, leaving a bowl of water by the fence for neighborhood strays, it might help to think of Cedar. Heart work doesn't always look heroic. Often it looks like consistency. Outside, as the days pass, the sky above Bend begins to change. The soft autumn drizzle gives way to heavier clouds. Forecasts mention a stronger system moving in off the Pacific. The air feels different in the evenings. Thicker, charged, waiting. Inside, Cedar is starting to stand a little taller in his enclosure. He tests his paws against the walls, feels his muscles respond. He still checks the bag with every movement, but the panic isn't as sharp. When Daniel sits nearby, the kitten's body no longer flattens completely to the floor. Once, in a moment so brief it's easy to miss, there's the faintest rumble deep in his chest, a tiny, uncertain purr that stops the second someone shifts their weight. The bridge of trust is fragile, but it's there. In the next part of this story, that fragile trust will be tested by more than a slammed door or a dropped tray. A storm is coming, and with it a night where every ounce of progress seems to shatter. It's a hard chapter, but it's also where Cedar's courage and the team's loyalty shine in a way you might never forget. If you're able, stay with him through what comes next. The way a wild heart chooses shelter, and the way humans respond when everything they've been building is suddenly at risk says a lot about love, about loyalty, and about... By the time the storm warning shows up on the center's tiny office computer, Cedar has begun to look a little more like a bobcat and a little less like a rumor of one. He eats outside. The clouds of a bend are thickening. The air feels heavier when Daniel steps out to lock the outer gates that afternoon. Far inside, Cedar is in the small training pen attached to his recovery room. It's not. The old bag rests in a corner, close enough for him to reach with a single bound. He glances at it often, just to make sure it hasn't vanished. The team talks quietly in the hallway about the storm. Bring the birds inside first. Check the tarps. Make sure nothing in the outdoor runs can become a flying hazard. For people who care for animals, weather is never just weather. It's a question. Will everyone be safe tonight? As evening comes on, wind presses harder against the side of the building. A loose sign outside knocks back and forth with a hollow clack. Cedar's ears twitch toward the sound, then flatten. His body language says what he can't. This kind of noise has meant trouble before. We don't always think about it, but stress in animals isn't just a feeling, it's physical. Heart rate climbs, muscles tighten, digestion slows. In tiny bodies like Cedar's, it doesn't take much for fear to tilt them right back toward the edge of collapse. If your doctor has ever told you that long-term stress can wear down your own heart, your stomach, your sleep, you've already met this idea in your own life. Daniel knows this. He and Lena walk the row of enclosures one more time, listening carefully. The owls are restless. The fox is pacing. In Cedar's pen, the little bobcat is no longer exploring. He's low to the ground, tail twitching in short, sharp bursts, eyes fixed on the door that leads outside. It's okay, Daniel says, more habit than promise. You're inside. You're all right. But storms don't ask if anyone's ready. The first crack of thunder rolls so close it seems to come from under the floor. The lights flicker once, twice. The building holds, but everyone feels the shift. Fair smacks harder against the windows, moving from polite taps to open palms. In the training pen, a sudden gust hits the outer door. The latch had been checked, but old hardware and hard weather have their own ideas. Metal shrieks. The door jumps in its frame, once, then again. On the third gust, it blows open. For a heartbeat, there is a perfect, terrible stillness. Cedar freezes, body stretched long, every muscle listening. The smell of wet earth and cold air pours in through the gap, carrying with it a blast of sound. Trees thrashing, rain hammering gravel, the deep, unsettling boom of a sky in pieces. Then instinct takes over. He bolts, not away from the bag, but toward it. His teeth close around the handle. Paws scramble for purchase as he drags it across the pen. For a second, it catches on the threshold, canvas grinding against metal. Then both kitten and bag are through and into the storm. The hallway erupts in motion. He's out! Which door? Training pen. Storm blew it! The flashlights are grabbed without words. Someone pulls on a jacket without getting both arms fully through. Footsteps pound down the corridor and out into the open, where rain slaps faces and soaks collars in seconds. This is the steep part of the mountain in our story. The climb where you're not sure if everyone will make it. Outside, visibility is a mess of gray. Lights from the building cut thin blades into the darkness, catching only sheets of water and the occasional flash of a branch bending too far. The training enclosure door gapes, banging against the frame with each gust. "Cedar!" Daniel calls, even though he knows names are more for people than for bobcats. "Cedar!" For a wild animal, human voices are not comfort. They're just more noise. Cedar is somewhere out here, small body trying to outrun a storm that feels like all his worst memories coming back at once. Machines, chaos, the sound of everything familiar being torn apart. The staff spread out along the perimeter fence, beams sweeping over mud, rocks, the base of trees. Tracks, if there were any, dissolve almost as soon as they're made. It's a kind of heartbreak that rescue workers know too well. Doing everything right and still watching control slip away in seconds.
Daniel drops to his knees more than once, hands pressing into cold, sloppy ground, searching for any sign. Hair caught on a branch, a scrape mark, anything. Rain runs down his neck, soaking his collar. Guilt mixes with the water on his face. I should have double-checked that latch, he thinks. I shouldn't have left him in the outer pen. The words tangle with older ones he's carried since his dog died. I should have caught it sooner. I should have done more.
If you've ever walked around your house after a loss, replaying small decisions, and wondering if you could have changed the ending, you know what's twisting in his chest. Then, in the middle of all that noise, something almost too soft to hear, a thin, broken sound caught between a whimper and a plea. Daniel freezes. He turns off his flashlight for a moment, letting his ears do the work his eyes can't. The wind roars. Rain drums the hood of his jacket. There it is again. Fainter, but there. He follows the sound along the fence line to a cluster of rocks near the back corner of the property. A shallow overhang juts out, just enough to make a pocket of shadow, just enough to break the rain. He drops to the mud and lifts a slick branch out of the way. There, pressed as far back as he can go, is Cedar. The tiny bobcat is curled around the canvas bag, every inch of his body shaking. Mud clings to his belly. Water darkens his fur. His eyes are squeezed shut, as if not seeing might somehow make the storm stop. His claws are sunk into the fabric, teeth still fastened to the handle. He didn't run toward freedom. He ran toward the only shelter he understood. Daniel reaches in slowly. He could try to pull the bag away, make the carry easier. He doesn't. He slides his hands under both, kitten and bag, together, and lifts. For a second, Cedar tenses. A tiny, ragged growl bubbles up, then dies as quickly as it comes. His body drops its fight, not out of trust exactly, but out of sheer exhaustion. He sinks into the crook of Daniel's arm, still clutching the bag between them, heart thudding hard against bone. There's a moment there, under that rock, where two kinds of loyalty meet. The wild loyalty of a bobcat who will not abandon the last cent of his family, and the stubborn loyalty of a man who refuses to abandon a frightened life in a storm, no matter how many times his own heart has been broken. The climb of this mountain, doors banging, rain pounding, fear spiking, is over. Now comes the careful descent, back through the storm, back into the light, back into a room that can be warm again. As Daniel carries Cedar inside, the kitten's head presses lightly against his chest, still buried in canvas and flannel. It's not the kind of happy you find in fairy tales. It's rougher, wetter, more complicated. But in the next part of this story, we'll see what happens after the storm, how the team uses this night not as an excuse to pull away, but as a reason to rethink how they help him become what he was born to be. A wild bobcat, not a pet, not a mascot, but a free, wary, capable animal who can live without people. If this back, stay with Cedar. The way he and the humans around him move forward from this setback may offer a quiet kind of hope that lingers long after the rain stops. The night of the storm could have broken Cedar. Instead, it drew a line in the sand. Before, he was simply rescued. After, he would have to learn how to be free. When Daniel carries him back inside, Cedar is limp with exhaustion. His claws are still locked in the canvas bag, jaws clenched around the handle. The room is warm, the lights steady, but his body hasn't gotten the message. His heart still races like the wind outside. They don't start with training. They start with warmth. Towels from the dryer layered under and over his small frame. Warm fluids through a catheter, checked and rechecked. The old bag placed within reach of his nose, so his world doesn't tilt more than it already has. It's a careful balance, giving him comfort without sending the signal that humans are the new center of his universe. Stress in bodies this small leaves a mark. It's not just trembling and wide eyes. It's temperature dropping, appetite fading, the immune system taking hits it can't afford. If you've ever come through a long season of worry and found yourself more tired than you thought possible, more fragile than you should be, you already understand what Cedar's body is trying to recover from. In the quiet hours after the storm, Daniel sits close, but not too close. He speaks when Cedar stirs, falls silent when he doesn't. He keeps one steady hand near the edge of the enclosure, not reaching in, just anchoring himself to the promise he made under that rock. If this bobcat has any say in it, fear is not going to be the last chapter of his story. But kindness, here, doesn't mean turning a wild animal into a house pet. As Cedar regains strength over the next days, the team has harder conversations in the hallway. They talk about bobcats as they really are, not as we sometimes wish they could be. Solitary, territorial, shy around people when given the chance, set who need space to roam, to stalk, to vanish into brush the color of their fur. A healthy wild bobcat should want nothing to do with us. That's the goal now. So even as they pour love and loyalty into Cedar's care, they start drawing firmer lines. They stop sitting as long right in front of his enclosure. They feed through long-handled dishes, no fingers near the bars. When they need to move him for exams, they work smoothly, with minimal talking, using covers and carriers that keep him from watching their faces too closely. When Cedar bats at a shoelace one afternoon, all instinct and play, Daniel's first reflex is to smile and wiggle it back, the way he did with his dog. His hand actually moves, then stops. He steps back, carefully, letting the lace fall still. His shoulders register the cost of that small no. It would feel good in the moment to give in, to let Cedar climb onto his lap, to stroke the soft spots behind the ears, to soak in that happy, kitten-like energy. The emotions tug hard. But this is one of those moral stories that's not about getting what you want. It's about choosing what's right for someone else, even when your own heart is hungry. Love, for him, Daniel reminds himself silently, means I don't become his safe place. The forest does. Training shifts slowly to reflect that. Inside the larger enclosure, they add more things that smell like the world he'll eventually return to. Branches dragged in from the edge of the property, still carrying the scent of damp moss and pine. Rocks warmed by sun, then cooled again, mimicking the rhythm of real ground. A few feathers tied to a line pulled just out of reach to awaken hunting muscles. Cedar responds. He crouches low, shoulder blades rising and falling under his coat. His eyes lock on the movement of the feather, not the hand that controls it. He darts, pounces, lands with more confidence each day. The old canvas bag sits in a corner now. He checks it, yes. He noses the flannel now and then. But his world isn't only that scent anymore. We don't always think of this as kindness, teaching someone to move away from us. But in Cedar's case, it's the purest form of it. They also teach him, gently, to be wary of what he should avoid. Metal bowls are replaced with natural-looking feeders. Human voices are kept low, and when he startles at the sound of a door slam, no one rushes in to soothe with touch. Instead, they let him hear the noise, recover, and go back to what he was doing, building resilience instead of dependence. From a distance, it might not look heartwarming. It might even look like they're being cold. But up close, the work is deeply soulful. Because love, in this chapter, means letting Cedar's wildness come forward, not covering it up with our need to feel needed. There are small moments that show it's working. One morning, Daniel walks by and realizes Cedar hasn't rushed to tuck himself against the bag at the first sound of footsteps. Instead, he's perched on a log, watching a squirrel that dared come too near the outside fence. His body language is different now. Alert, curious, in tune with something beyond his own fear. Another evening, a volunteer drops a clipboard. The clatter echoes down the hallway. Cedar flinches, of course. Old memories don't vanish. But he doesn't freeze the way he used to. His ears flatten, then slowly rise. He tests the air, decides there is no immediate danger, and goes back to testing his claws against the bark. If you've ever told yourself, next time I'm scared, I'll try to breathe before I run, you can see a little of yourself in his practice. Alongside the emotional work, there's quiet education folded in. Short explanations, simple language. Bobcats in this region may cover several miles in their territories, slipping through places we barely notice. As houses push farther into the trees, their paths twist around fences, roads, noise. A mother nesting in an old tool bag near a construction site isn't foolish. She's doing the best she can with options we've changed. Knowing that doesn't solve everything, but it adds a layer of respect to Cedar's story. He's not just a sad figure clinging to trash. He's part of a bigger picture of how wild lives and human choices intersect. In that sense, his healing becomes an inspirational story that reaches beyond one animal. It changes Daniel, too. He starts to feel the silence at home shift from sharp to gentle. The dog bed in the corner is gone now, replaced by a small wooden bench where he can sit to untie his boots after work. The leash still lives in a drawer, but he doesn't open it as often. He doesn't need the objects quite as urgently to remember the love. Watching Cedar reclaim his wildness helps him understand that love doesn't always mean holding on as tightly as you can. Sometimes, love means getting someone ready to leave you. Maybe that's true for grown children moving to another state, for a friend beginning a new life, for a pet whose body has grown tired, or for a wild bobcat whose paws are itching for pine needles instead of concrete. In the next part of this journey, we'll follow Cedar to the edge of that freedom. We'll see what release day looks like when it's done with care, how the crate door opens, how the forest receives him, and how a few trail cameras quietly answer the question everyone is afraid to ask. Will he be okay out there? If you can, stay with this story a little longer. The way Cedar steps from human hands back into the wild might offer you a new way to think about letting go in your own life. Softly, bravely, with a kind of happiness that doesn't need a fairy tale ending to feel real. On the morning they let Cedar go, the world feels quieter than usual. It's that still, breath-held kind of quiet that sometimes comes just before sunrise in the pines. The air is cool, carrying the smell of damp earth and old needles. A thin veil of mist hangs low between the trunks, softening the edges of everything. In the parking lot behind the rescue center, a crate waits in the back of the old truck. Here's the gentle hook. For weeks, everyone has wondered how Cedar's story would end. Would he cling to the old canvas bag until the last second? Would he freeze when the gate opened? Or would something in him recognize the forest the way you recognize your own street after a long trip away? Today, they're going to find out. Cedar has grown into himself. His legs no longer look too long for his body. There's a steady, grounded strength in the way he stands when they lift him, crate and all, into the truck. He does not mule like a pet being taken to the vet. He moves with the tense caution of a wild bobcat who has learned enough about humans to be wary, but not so much that he can't live without them. Inside the building, on a shelf by the staff fridge, sits the old canvas bag. The flannel inside is frayed and faded now, the scent of milk mostly replaced by steel and dust and time. It's not the lifeline it once was, but it's not just trash either. It's a chapter, a relic of love and loss and loyalty that almost cost him his life. Daniel picks it up on his way out to the truck. The fabric is stiffer than he remembers. He turns it over in his hands, thumb tracing the torn logo, the seam where flannel peeks through. It would be easy to tuck it into the crate, just in case, to soothe his own heart with the idea that Cedar won't be leaving everything familiar behind. He rests the bag on the tailgate and looks through the slats at the bobcat inside. Cedar's eyes are on the tree line, not on him. His nose is testing the wind, drawing in scents from far beyond the gravel lot. This is your world now, Daniel thinks. Not as a speech, just as a thought. Not mine. Not this bag. The trees. After a long pause, he does something that feels both small and enormous. He sets the canvas bag back on the shelf inside the building. This is where the moral part of this story sits quietly. Love, in its most soulful form, sometimes means not bringing the comfort object along. Not because it didn't matter, but because clinging to it could keep someone from stepping fully into the life they're meant for. The drive out to the release site is slow. The road winds away from town, past thinning houses and mailboxes, past the last gas station, into country where cell service drops and the trees grow thicker. Inside the crate, Cedar shifts, adjusting his paws, tail flicking now and then as new smells roll in through the air vents. No one talks much. The soft rattle of the crate and the hum of the engine say plenty. When they finally pull off onto a narrow dirt road, the truck bumps over ruts and rocks until it can go no further. From here, they walk. 2 people at the front, carrying the crate between them. Daniel close behind with a small pack and a couple of trail cameras strapped to the sides. There's something almost like a fairy tale in the way they move single file into the trees, mist curling around their ankles, the world behind them falling away. But this isn't the kind of story where the hero comes back with a crown. This is the kind where the happiest ending is the one where he never needs them again. The release spot isn't random. Weeks before, they scouted this patch of protected land. There's water nearby, a shallow creek hidden under alders, enough cover for a young bobcat to disappear in seconds if he wants to. Game trails crisscross the ridge, marked faintly with tracks and scat, and the musky signatures of other wild hearts. This is bobcat country. Not perfect, no place is anymore, but it's as close as they can offer. They set the crate down, facing a gentle slope that leads into thicker forest. For a moment, nobody moves. The only sounds are the creek's soft murmur and a jay's distant complaint. Daniel kneels beside the crate, not quite close enough to touch it. He doesn't speak to Cedar, not out of coldness, but out of respect. Words have been for the long middle of this story, for the nights in the storm, the days by the enclosure. Out here, the language is wind, soil, the faint thump of his own heart in his ribs. He reaches forward and flips the latch. The crate door rises slowly, hinges creaking just a little, then stops. The opening is there, a square of possibility framed by low morning light. For a few seconds, nothing happens. Cedar is a shadow behind the slats, still as a carved figure. Then he moves. First, just his nose. It appears at the gap, whiskers trembling, drawing in the scent of pine and water and living earth. His ears follow, tilting like small attentive satellites. He steps forward, one paw at a time, placing them with care on the new ground. When his full body emerges, there's a hush that has nothing to do with sound. He does not run straight away. He stands, head lifted, sides expanding with deep, deliberate breaths. The world out here is bigger than the enclosure. It's full of noise and tracing paths and memories he hasn't made yet. He takes his time. For one long moment, he turns his head and looks back, not at the crate, at the humans. His gaze meets Daniel's with a kind of calm that is hard to describe. It's not gratitude in the way we imagine it. It's not the adoring look of a pet waiting for a treat. It's more like simple acknowledgement, a quiet, shared understanding. We crossed paths. You helped. Now we each go back to where we belong. Then, with a flick of his short tail, Cedar steps into the ferns. In 3 strides, he's half hidden. In 6, he's gone. The forest takes him the way it's taken countless bobcats before him, without fanfare, without applause. Just acceptance. A rustle, a brief flash of spots, then only trees and silence. For a heartbeat, the emptiness in front of the crate feels sharp. Months of love, worry, loyalty, all walking away on silent paws. But there's a deep happiness threaded through it too. The kind that comes when an inspirational story doesn't end with someone staying, but with them leaving in exactly the way they were meant to. Before they head back, they get to work. A trail camera goes on a tree facing a narrow gain path. Another near the creek, angled low where paw prints sink into damp sand. They mark the locations on a map, not to stalk, but to bear witness. To see, if they're lucky, whether kindness here has led to a life out there. Weeks pass. Work at the center continues. New patients arrive, old ones move on. The staff checks the cameras when they can, downloading footage in the break room between feedings and phone calls. Mostly they get deer, raccoons, a coyote slipping through shadows, the occasional human hiker.
Then, one evening, a familiar shape appears on the small screen. A bobcat, moving along the game trail with that slow, powerful ease that comes when muscles and instincts finally match. Broad head, strong shoulders.
Tie with that same little flick at the end. The image is grainy, colors washed thin by the cheap infrared lens. But there's something in the posture that makes everyone lean in. Could be him, someone says.
Could be another, someone else answers. They rewind, watch again. No one is willing to stamp certainty on it. Wild lives are not ours to catalog like property.
But in their hearts, they allow themselves a quiet, hopeful maybe.
Maybe Cedar is out there, hunting voles along the creek, bedding down in a thicket when the rain comes, marking his own edges of the world.
Maybe he walks past the camera only once and never again, leaving them with one blurred frame and a sense of peace. And even if they never see him on a screen, there's a kind of happy ending in that, too. The best moral stories about wildlife often end in not knowing, in trusting that love and loyalty did their part, and the rest belongs to the animal and the land. In the final part of this story, we'll step back from the forest and look at the ripples Cedar leaves behind, in a neighbor who made a phone call, in a small rescue center, and in a man who arrived at this work with a broken heart and found it changing shape. We'll also talk, gently, about what you can do if you ever find a life like his on the side of the road. If you can, stay with us for that last chapter.
The bobcat kitten and his old bag may be gone from the screen by then, but what they left behind in people, and maybe in you, is where the real heartwarming story continues. Some stories end at the edge of the forest. This one doesn't. It keeps going in quieter places, on back roads, in small kitchens, inside the softest parts of people's hearts. After Cedar slipped into the pines and the trees closed behind him, life at the rescue center didn't suddenly become easy or perfect. The work went on. New injuries, new fear, new kindness. But something had shifted. Not just for the tiny bobcat who once clung to an old bag, but for the humans who crossed his path. And for a few strangers who only knew him as that little wildcat on the side of the road. The woman who made the first call still drives that stretch of highway. She can't unsee the image of a drenched bobcat kitten wrapped around a canvas bag. But she's grateful for that. Now, in the thick of summer, she keeps a shallow ceramic bowl near her mailbox, always filled with fresh water. It's not just for bobcats. It's for whoever is thirsty. Birds, stray cats, raccoons, the occasional passing dog walker. She doesn't make a big speech about it. She just leaves it there. A small act of love that no one applauds, but that quietly says, "You're not alone out here." A highway worker who helped guide traffic that stormy night keeps a folded flyer from the rescue in his glove compartment. Now he walks the brush line before the machinery starts. He pauses by tool piles and tarps, listening for the thin cries he once almost missed. Sometimes he finds nothing, just wind and dust. Once, he found a nest of quail tucked under dropped lumber and stopped the work long enough to move them. Kindness slips into his day like that now. Not loud, not showy, just loyal. Inside the rescue center, Cedar's chart is eventually filed away, but not forgotten. The old canvas bag is emptied, the flannel carefully folded and placed in a small box with other quiet relics. A length of snipped snare wire, the snapped-off tip of an arrow that was removed from a deer, the tag from Daniel's dog collar. None of these things are pretty, but together they tell a moral story about what love can survive and what it can change. And Daniel himself? His life doesn't turn into a fairy tale where nothing hurts again. Grief doesn't work that way. There are still evenings when he opens his front door and feels, for just a second, that his dog will be there on the other side. But the ache has softened. The empty dog bed is gone, replaced by a low bench where he can sit to untie his boots after long days. Sometimes a foster animal from another case naps there for a few weeks before finding a home. The leash that once hung by the door is in a box on a shelf now, tucked beside a printed still image from the trail camera. The one fuzzy frame that might be Cedar. Shoulders strong,
tail flicking as he moves past the lens. These things don't erase the pain he's known. They give it shape. They turn loss into something that can sit beside kindness and not shrink it. Watching a wild heart like Cedar move from panic to cautious trust to independence has nudged Daniel's own emotions into a new kind of balance. He's learned, in a way he can't quite put into words, that love and loyalty aren't measured only by how tightly you can hold on, but by how gently you can let go. Maybe that's something you recognize too. Maybe you've sat at a kitchen table with an empty chair across from you. Maybe you've stood in a quiet hallway, hand resting on a closed door, feeling emotions you're not sure where to put. Maybe you've kept a collar, a mug, a jacket, a favorite book. Ordinary objects that became anchors when someone you loved stepped out of sight. If your chest ached a little, hearing about a tiny bobcat clinging to an old bag, it says something good about you. In a world that can feel fast and sharp, your softness, your loyalty, your soulful care for small lives is not weakness. It's proof that your heart still knows how to see what's fragile and choose kindness anyway. And if you ever do find yourself facing a wild animal in trouble, a bobcat, an owl, a fox on the roadside, the gentlest thing you can do is often simple. Stay back, stay calm, and call people trained to help. Note where you are. Notice nearby dangers. Let the professionals bring love and skill together so that wild animals can heal without losing the wildness that makes them who they are. Stories like Cedar's remind us that heartwarming stories don't have to be loud to be powerful. They're woven out of small, faithful acts. A neighbor dialing a number instead of driving past. A worker checking the brush before he starts the machine. A man sitting on the floor near an ant enclosure, talking quietly to an animal who doesn't know his words, but feels his sincerity. Before we close, you might take a moment and ask yourself, where in your own life is there a tiny life on the roadside you've been noticing but not quite reaching toward? It might be an actual animal, a lonely neighbor, a family member you've been meaning to call, or even a part of yourself that's been holding on to an old canvas bag made of memories. If this inspirational story of a little bobcat and the people who refused to look away has touched you, you're welcome to stay with us. You can gently tap, like, or subscribe, and keep walking alongside more real-life fairy tales from the wild. Stories of love, loyalty, emotions, and quiet courage that bring a bit of hope back into the day. And if you feel moved to help rescues keep doing this work for bobcats and other wild animals, offering warmth, medicine, and second chances when the world has been unkind, a warm super thanks or small donation goes further than you might imagine. It helps buy the formula, the bandages, the trail cameras and crates, the everyday tools that turn compassion into action. However you choose to carry this story with you, thank you for letting Cedar's journey brush against your own. The wild may never know your name, but somewhere out there, a life is a little safer because someone like you cared.